This is the most wonderful prayer in the world. I'm going to read it to you. I want you to listen to the end and I'll explain something. Our Father who art in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread and forgive our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Let us not be led into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen and amen. Now you notice that I said, let us not be led.
Right.
The Pope's people got a hold of me and 11 other men that are rabbis and asked us about this. And I said, that is wrong. What it says, lead us. The Lord would never lead you into temptation.
Right.
Now the Pope says the same thing I've been saying for years. Don't let it, we don't want to be led into temptation. We want to protect us. This mistake was made, we're French, by the French Pope Benedict back just after in the 1300s. He was bad news. He was the one that actually killed the Knights Templar so that the Masons started, so evil came from evil. I shouldn't say that, there might be Masons in here, but I can't quite understand that organization, and one of my best friends is one. And every time I go to their stuff, they take real good care of me. They have great pancake breakfast, by the way. This prayer changed the world. This prayer literally changed the whole world in its path, because it provided a path, a narrow path albeit, but it provided a path to stay on. Now, what I'm going to read tonight, I'm going to explain to you, this happens today, what we're about to read tonight. And that's what we have to understand is, this is the only perfect thing on earth right now. It's eternal and it's perfect. What's John 1:1 say? First thing it says, in the beginning is the Word. The Word was not only with Elohim, the Most High, but the Word is Him. This is a special weekend, or special Shabbat, because we are not going to have a reading from the prophets tonight. We're going to have a second reading from the Torah, and it's called the Maftir. And Maftir means the water that surrounds you is from the law of the prince. I mean, that's a lot to take in, but that's the kind of stuff that moves me to tears. I mean, they talked about Psalm 120. I was taught to always remember Psalm 121. Hine lo, Yanud velo, Yisham Shomer, Yisrael. He who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. So I know that my family and everybody that believes in Him is covered every night. Every night when you go to sleep. And that's why we're here tonight. If you ever sit on the edge of your bed when you're getting ready to go to sleep and think, what if I don't wake up? But once you receive Him, which is the hardest and the easiest thing to do, you get to that wall, and that wall is hard. It's like the hardest glass there is. But the one thing that hard glass can't come up against is bright light or heat. It'll melt like cellophane. And that's what we have to understand and let ourselves be covered by. He's a covering for us. That's what Maftir means. Now I'm going to read this. The Lord spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a woman conceives and bears a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. As the time of her menstruation, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Then they shall continue 33 days in the blood of her purifying. Now, growing up on my grandfather's farm, we had a second house, because I had 4 aunts living at home and my grandmother at the same time. And when any of them were in their menstruation, they had to go live in that house. They couldn't be in the main house. And I got to tell you, there were a lot less arguments back in those days. And it was hard. It was hard because when a baby was born, you didn't see it for a month. It was with the mother the whole time. But that's also important because how many mothers are part-time mothers today? This was a bonding period that is ordered by the Lord. It's not no kind of sort of. It's ordered. My mother did it to me. My grandmother did it to my dad. And my great-grandmother did it to my grandmother and all her brothers. This stuff it still goes on. She shall continue in the blood of her purifying for 66 days. That's not by accident. How many books are in the Bible? And when the days of your purifying are completed, whether for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring to the Kohanim, the priest, at the entrance of the tent of meeting, a lamb a year old for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering, and he shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her, and she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for who bears a child, either male or female. If she cannot afford a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean. The last thing it's done after the birth is, now you have to understand the altar isn't like what people think. It's not like a chunk of wood. This thing is a furnace, okay? And it burned at 1700 degrees, straight up in the air. Now I didn't realize what the power that was, but when I was a kid and I worked in the steel mill, they had what they called soaking pits, where when they would make the steel, they would make it into big ingots, and they would turn that, they would get those red hot to roll out of slabs of steel, and they'd sell that. Well, they opened the soaking pits, and there was a dead river rat that had to be as big as a cat, and a guy threw it in the soaking pits, and it never hit the bottom. It vaporized. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And that's how I knew what they were talking about. That's why they did a wave. You ever heard of a wave offering? They waved the wheat stalks over there because they weren't going to get their hand in there. Or when they threw a lamb, they would cut it into chunks and they would throw it in there. Now we don't do that anymore. We celebrate Pesach or Passover the way it was done originally. What we do is barbecue either a leg or a shoulder of lamb on the barbecue and eat that with horseradish and matzah all night. And talk about what the last year and what the next year what we're going to do to be a good witness for the Lord. Because that's all we can do. From the time we're born and we receive Him, the best we can do is be a witness for Him. And I can tell you, I don't know about you guys, but I always screw up. Best way for me to be a good witness is to keep this on my head. Because it reminds me. My grandfather the old rabbi used to say, don't ever take your kippah off. I said, why? And he said, because it shows. The Lord holds His head on your head, and you can never figure out how it stays on. The Lord holds it on your head, and He reminds you that you are forever a servant. And that's what we are. And what we have to offer is a witness. Now, those of you in Pakistan, you come up against some strong stuff. I'm telling you right now, the best way for you to fend it off, if you feel it's really bad in your house, I did it today in my house, is you just say, I rebuke you in the name of Yeshua ben Elohim. This is what the Archangel Michael said. It's out of the book of, oh my goodness, Jude. Out of the book of Jude. It said that even the Archangel Michael, when fighting with the bones of Moses with Satan, didn't issue a railing judgment, but just said, the Lord rebuke you. And this is the one thing he has no power. Because anything that's in your head that might be wrong, nobody's going to know about it unless you speak it. That's what he doesn't have power over. He doesn't have power over speech unless you let him. But if you're covered by Yeshua, He has no power over his speech, your speech. And a lot of these things seem to be crude. And I guess they were. I'm not going to question it because it's scripture. They seem to be crude, but I also noticed that they work spiritually. I looked at things always from a spiritual standpoint. Still do. Still do. I mean, right now I'm studying the Quran. What the Muslims believe in. Turns out they believe in Jesus. They believe he's coming back. They call him a prophet. Well, you know what, if your prophet is, anything you spoke is true. And usually prophets who speak the truth end up dead. Hello? The only difference is he arose. I don't know if you've checked the news lately, but the slab that he laid on Jerusalem is now bleeding. And they can't understand. They can't explain it. They kept it out of the news for a while, but that's the one place tourists want to go. So, I don't understand that. But I wasn't going to question it. I mean, the thing to remember is, he wasn't buried within Jerusalem walls. That wasn't allowed. Everybody was buried outside the walls, except for the priests. The other thing that you can read Josephus, or there's some Roman books you can read. When he was put in the tomb, they rolled a giant stone over it, a round stone, and there were 10 Roman legionnaires that waited at the door, and he got by them. Now, these are 10 guys that their job is just to watch things. That's all they did, just watch things and attack. He walked right by them like they weren't even there. The problem with us today is we walk by him as if he isn't even there. And this is when we fall into contempt. You know, it's his courtroom. I know that sounds rough, but he's the one that controls all this, if we let him. If we don't let him, then sometimes we have to suffer the consequences. And more often than not, I mean, I'll tell you right now, the book of Zephaniah calls it, and you need to read it. I forget where it's at in Zephaniah. I'd have to look it up. But he said that Syria will be utterly destroyed. That means, in Hebrew, means there will not be anything on their hole where they are over a foot high. And it says that not even the animals would go back there. Well, I can only think of one thing that's going to do that, and that's a nuclear weapon. And, you know, whether it's the Nautilus submarines carry 12 Polaris missiles with nuclear weapons on there, and then the B-2 bombers carry 4, and they have Tomahawks, and they can hit within 10 feet of where they're fired on. They'll tell you 900 feet, but I know it's 10 feet. So we're right there at the precipice. We're armed. Syria will be the first to go. Guarantee it. Well, they already got bombed once. So I'm not going to speak, you know. But this is above everything. I mean, I know people that get so excited about the news, but understand, the news is a temporal state. At some point, this is all going to be burned up. So the only thing we can do is be with Yeshua. One time, I was asleep, and I had taken a medicine that didn't agree with me. It put me in a coma. But I remember waking up, and I hardly knew where I was. But I remember seeing him, and I felt such love. I tried to make myself mad at people that had made me mad. I couldn't do it. And I didn't want to leave. And he said, it's not time yet. There's only been a few times I've had really, really incredible visitation from him. Whether it's in a vision or it's in, you know, a state. I will tell you, what he calls his rest is unbelievable. It just, if you could think of your whole body being able to see all around you, and all you see is nothing but a shimmering palace. This is what I've seen. I saw that tonight on the way up here. They look, the inside of these rooms look like, you ever seen a Fabergé egg? That's what the inside of these rooms were, giant pearls, just stacked. Oh, it was amazing. So they were real specific about what they would have to atone for. Now at the very end, they asked for a lamb, and I used to have to slaughter lambs for Passover. My grandfather had a long choquette knife. Choquette is a kosher butcher, and it was razor sharp. And as I held the lamb, I put my arm around, and I grabbed this leg. See what my arms are doing? He would cut the throat, and the blood would run down over my arms. How's that for an example? Didn't know why that moved me every time I saw it, because he did it in such a way, it was almost like he did the lamb a favor. But you never get used to have something in your arms that passes away. I saw it in Vietnam. I've seen it here in this country. I was a physician's assistant in the Air Force. When a life leaves, when a soul leaves a body, it's overwhelming. Especially if it ascends. It is just unbelievable. And this is why he came for us. That's why this last atonement is the Lamb. What did John say? Could you imagine being there when he said that? He's baptizing people in the Jordan. And it's in a turn. You've probably seen it where he did it. It's in a turn of the river. And he's baptizing people there. And all of a sudden he stops and looks up. And Yeshua's walking towards him. And he says, "Behold, Hine." The lamb that saves the whole world. The lamb has come for you. Now, nobody could ever afford a lamb for sacrifice. Most they got were pigeons and turtle doves, and they were caught wild. Lambs are a whole other story. Maybe a goat, maybe an ox. Lambs are a whole different story. I mean, you really have to realize where David kept his flocks, and those fields are the exact same fields where the sheep were tended for sacrifice in the temple, in those exact same fields. So this is why when Yeshua was born and the shepherds came out of the hills, everybody was scared to death, because if you had injured a shepherd or one of the sheep or the goat or the lambs, that was an instant death sentence. They put you to death for that. You'd probably get beat just for touching them. So here they are pouring in this town, and everybody's going, "Oh, what are you doing? You're trying to get us killed?" And they said, "No, there's no need for us anymore because of him." You know, people say that the animals gathered around him to keep him warm. They didn't gather around him to keep him warm. They gathered around him because they knew he was the Lord. They knew. An animal, whether people want to believe it or not, when they're explained in Scripture, they're explained as nefesh, which means a soul. So if you think your dog or your cat is a little smarter spiritually than you gave them credit for, they are. If you're mad, they know it. If you're happy, they know it. I mean, I just recently got a puppy. All 45 pounds of him now. He was supposed to be became this little black puppy. Just cute as all get out. He ripped my hands up. They're just now healing. Now he's 45 pounds. And he brings so much joy to me. And the Lord speaks in so many ways. You don't believe me? Watch what happens in the springtime. Tell me when people smell flowers and they see the trees, if they're not happy. He speaks to us through everything we do if we're willing to hear. We have to be willing to hear. Technology. The second reading is out of Leviticus, starting with 31. Oh, 15:31. I'm sorry, another number. Thus you shall keep the people of Israel separate from their uncleanliness, lest they die in their uncleanliness by defiling my tabernacle that is in their midst. This was so important because, you know, if you look at an outlay, you can look on the web probably, an outlay of the temple, and you'll see where all the different tribes are. Well, in this corner over here are the Levites, and they're on both sides of the corner, because when the pillar of light, the cloud comes in, they divide, and it comes in and it's over the Holy of Holies. But they can see it day and night. By day it looks like a cloud, by night it looks like a pillar of fire. And that's His glory that rested over there. So this is the Lord, as the Most High knows Him, speaking directly to these people. Yeah, we're peculiar people. We went through some pretty crazy stuff. I mean, a lot of those people didn't make it. Look at what happened to, what's his name? The earth opened up and swallowed his whole family because they thought they should be in charge of the temple instead of Moses. It said the earth opened up, swallowed all their family and all their animals and all their possessions, and sealed up, and they couldn't tell that anything happened. That's the kind of stuff we have to understand that can happen at any time. We're in a time of signs and wonders. Prophet here, he's right on the money. He's right on the money. We're in a time of signs and wonders. And this is not a time to shrink. This is not a time to be politically correct, as they say. This is a time to be a witness. And a witness to Him is going to be tough because His witness was tough. His witness, let's face it, here's the Son of the Most High. He's up on a cross. Do you know how fast He could have taken those nails and threw them through those Roman legions? And then opened His mouth and lightning would come from it and kill everybody in the vicinity. This is what it talks about happening. This is what's going to happen to Moses and Elijah when they're up on for a year, speaking, or 3 years speaking. All they do is speak the Torah over and over and over again. Anybody goes near them gets struck down by lightning that comes out of their mouth. These aren't wives' tales. This is going to happen. This is going to happen. I mean, you don't hear the fact that the Dome of the Rock, that golden dome that's up on the Temple Mount, it's caving in. And guess what? They can't do a thing about it because Israel owns everything under the Temple Mount. The other temple is exactly between where the old temple and the new temple is, which is exactly where the Gentiles are supposed to be, or the Muslims. That's exactly where they're supposed to be. So there are Muslims we have to pray for who know He's returning and they're praying for Him. Do they have some goofy laws? Yeah, but I read you some pretty goofy laws too that nobody pays attention to. This is the law for him who has a discharge, and for him who has an emission of semen, become unclean thereby. I know what to do. Imagine that switch. That holds it so it doesn't go off on me. No, we're not. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they drew near before the Lord and died. Now what they did was offered what's known as strange fire. What they did was they took sacrifices and burned them, and they offered them to a false god. And they were struck dead immediately because they were touching the Ark of the Covenant. And when they offered that fire, it was like 2 pounds of ashes. I mean, when it says this stuff, it literally means, you can imagine, if someone got hit with lightning and they were grounded well, there'd be nothing left of them. It'd be like the most amazing hot dog cooker in the world. You'd just be a pile of ashes. They drew near before the Lord and died. And the Lord said to Moshe, tell Aaron, your brother, not to come at any time into the holy place inside the veil, before the mercy seat that is on the ark, so that he may not die. For I will appear in the cloud over the mercy seat. But in this way Aaron shall come into the holy place, with a bull from a herd for a sin offering, and a ram and for a burnt offering. And he shall put on the holy linen coat, and shall have linen undergarment on his body. And he shall tie the sash around his waist, and wear the linen turban. These are holy garments. He shall. So what happens is, because it says, he shall bathe his body in water, and then put them on. And he shall take from the congregation of the people of Israel 2 male goats for a sin offering, and 1 ram for a burnt offering. So here's what happens, because you have to envision this. Aaron goes, and he offers these offerings, because when he offers the offerings, they burn up, and that smoke goes all over him. So the offering's all over him. He then goes down to the laver, which is full of water, and he washes off in the laver. And then from the laver, he dries off, and they anoint him and put on the linens, which means he had pants, which wasn't something they had at that time. That meant that every part of his flesh that was for reproductive or discharge purposes was covered in linen, consecrated linen. So there was nothing unclean about it. Because when he went into the Holy of Holies, if he wasn't like that, he would have died. I mean, they tied a rope around his foot. And so that if he died in there, they could pull him back out.
Welcome. This is Sister Joan, Secretary for Upper Room Ministry. You can see the rest of this message each Sunday evening, your local time. If you would like to receive our monthly newsletter and know the things the Lord is speaking to Prophet Humphrey, then please send a love offering to help cover our expenses. Also, if you would like to have an anointed prayer cloth and become a ministry partner, send us your pictures so we can pray, lay hands on you and your need, and expect signs, wonders, and miracles in your life. Starting today, you will never be the same. Our website is upperroomministry.net. If you would like to schedule a speaking engagement, contact our ministry. All glory to Jesus. Amen. Amen.